Picture this. It's Wednesday, August 5th, 2026, pre-dawn darkness. The floodlights are glaring on wet concrete as a massive convoy of missile trucks rolls out of Zhuoyang Naval Base. Taillights are literally bleeding into the dark as Taiwan's largest annual military exercise, Han Kuang 42, officially begins. In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into how this year's exercise is fundamentally different from absolutely anything that has come before.
The clock starts right now on 10 days and 9 nights. We are talking continuous, unscripted live-fire drills involving over 20,000 troops and up to 5,000 reservists. But you know, the head count, that isn't the real story here. The absolute core of what makes Han Kuang 42 so historic is an unprecedented new objective. They aren't primarily rehearsing against a dramatic amphibious invasion. Instead, they're testing their ability to counter a maritime blockade, a siege.
So, Act 1, the reality check. Let's look at what was actually announced and, more importantly, what wasn't.
Major General Lu Wen-yuan briefed a scenario broken down into 4 distinct phases. It kicks off with combat readiness deployment, basically depicting the adversary hiding their attack prep behind routine exercises. Then, we move into force protection, where Taiwanese forces have to transit while under a blockade. It then escalates to joint counterlanding against a multi-axis amphibious assault, and finally, in-depth defense and protracted warfare as units are pushed inland.
But right here is the crucial reality check. 3 massive pieces of this puzzle remain completely off the board and entirely classified: detailed unit locations, the actual live-fire scripts, and the final assessment results. Because these drills are so highly guarded, any confident claims you might hear right now regarding definitive success or failure are purely inference. We have to follow the evidence we have, not just our assumptions.
Moving on to Act 2, the anatomy of a siege. This is the threat they have literally never rehearsed at this scale.
So you might be asking, why a blockade and why right now? Well, a growing body of analysis points out that a contested amphibious invasion, landing across 100 miles of open water in front of the world's cameras, is arguably the hardest operation in modern warfare. A blockade, on the other hand, that demands patience. It's something that can be built slowly using Coast Guard cutters and spiking insurance premiums, and it can be steadily dialed up or down.
And it exposes a glaring vulnerability. As the saying goes, you are fighting the electricity grid. Taiwan imports the vast majority of its energy. Squeeze the Pacific sea lanes, and you aren't just fighting an army anymore, you are suffocating the entire island's power supply. This is exactly why Taiwan's Navy and Coast Guard are now practicing joint counter-blockade escorts out east rather than just bottling up inside the choke points of the Taiwan Strait. This exact nightmare scenario was rigorously tested back in 2025 by the Washington think tank CSIS in a study they called Lights Out. They ran 26 separate war games and came to a fascinating conclusion. While targeting Taiwan's energy sector through a blockade would absolutely inflict severe hardship, it is not a cheap or low-risk option for China. The massive escalatory pressure it creates makes it extremely difficult to contain.
Okay, Act 3. Testing command and civilians. Let's look at the unprecedented adaptations happening right now on the ground.
On July 1st, 2026, Taiwan established a brand new headquarters in Yunlin County called the Littoral Combat Command. This is a massive consolidation. They pulled anti-ship missiles, coastal defense, mobile radar, and unmanned systems all under one single roof. Their one and only job is to find and hit approaching vessels. And Han Kuang 42, it's their very first test.
Second is a really stark defensive reality check over at the newly opened Danjiang Bridge. The Army's 53rd Engineer Group isn't practicing how to defend the bridge from the water. No, they are practicing access denial. Taiwanese engineers are actually rehearsing how to strategically blow up or deny their own brand new infrastructure to an enemy force that has already seized the coast and is advancing on the capital. It's a grim scenario.
Third, they are bringing the public deeply into the fold. Urban resilience is fully integrated now across 14 administrative regions. They've expanded these drills to 2 whole days, practicing underground medical operations, civilian evacuations, and even drone supply deliveries. And most strikingly, they went so far as to deliberately throttle mobile networks to simulate wartime degradation. They're actually turning off the bars on people's phones.
Act 4. Preparing for the second week. This involves some borrowed grammar and moved factories.
To actually survive into that second week of a conflict, Taiwan is making a fascinating structural shift. They're adopting an American planning habit called the back brief.
Now, I know that sounds like administrative paperwork, but it's really the connective tissue of mission command. It completely decentralizes command, ensuring that when the radios inevitably die, the lieutenants on the ground can just keep fighting toward the commander's original intent without waiting around for new orders.
Now pair that decentralized command with industrial survival. They simulated the emergency relocation of the Armaments Bureau's 202nd Arsenal. They are actually rehearsing wartime production conversion, literally unbolting civilian machine tools and moving them just to keep output going. You are watching a military desperately testing if they can keep the ammunition flowing long after primary ports have been struck.
Which brings us to Act 5, resilience or exposure. We have two completely different readings of the exact same 10 days.
As an objective explainer, we really need to acknowledge that these exact same facts support two completely different geopolitical viewpoints. The argument for resilience is incredibly strong. Moving to unscripted operations, standing up a littoral command, and fusing civil defense proves a massive ability to absorb a hit. But on the flip side, the argument for exposure is equally stark. Attempting a counter-blockade capability for the very first time in 2026 exposes some severe vulnerabilities. 5,000 reservists is just a fraction of what a real war would require, and let's be honest, breaking a blockade requires outside help that absolutely no drill can guarantee.
Act 6. The endless gray zone. The constant pressure that literally never stops. Look at this data. Independent tracking reveals a massive 60% drop in PLA air sorties year over year. We're talking 431 in March 2025, down to just 173 in March 2026. At first glance, you might think, oh, great, a de-escalation. But it's actually a smokescreen. Because while air sorties dropped, naval and Coast Guard incursions held completely steady, and in some areas, they actually persisted and lengthened.
Then you have incidents like this one from July 2026, where a PLA helicopter, not a fighter jet, a helicopter, crossed the median line straight into a restricted eastern zone. Analysts point out that this is a huge signal. Beijing is deliberately rebalancing its pressure. They're shifting from the air to the sea, moving from overt military threats toward a sort of constabulary enforcement. The pressure is evolving into the exact scenario that Han Kuang 42 is rehearsing for.
Finally, the final assessment, what they simply won't say out loud.
While politicians are out there making grand public statements about deterrence, their actions speak much louder. A military that spends 10 days deliberately practicing for severed communications, massive grid failures, and decentralized command is making a very clear, very silent judgment about its future. They are literally rehearsing life after the cables are cut, while an adversary simply waits offshore.
So it leaves us with this. If the likelier threat is a siege rather than a full invasion, does rehearsing it for the first time in 2026 actually build credible deterrence? Or does it inadvertently reveal the gap in their capabilities? The true outcome of Han Kuang 42 isn't whatever official report Taipei publishes next month. The real outcome will be the quiet, unannounced changes they make to their defense posture moving forward, leaving us to wonder what hard truths they learned in the dark but simply cannot say out loud.